Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. A lot of you have asked me to look into the story of a Canadian renter who had to pay his landlord's taxes to the tune of $43,000. Now, originally, Canada Revenue Agency wanted $80,000, but he fought it in court and they reduced it to the $43,000, which isn't really a win because after he pays his lawyers, he's probably worse off than if he just paid the $80,000. So, what happened in this case? How does this possibly happen? Well, David Sisko rents an apartment and he thinks everything is fine. The problem is, unbeknownst to him, or at least he says unbeknownst to him, his landlord didn't live in Canada. She lived in Italy. And the Canada Revenue Agency actually says if a rental is from a non-resident, then that landlord owes 25% of the rent as taxes. And if they can't get it from the landlord, if the landlord isn't remitting that, then the tenant is on the hook for that money. And so technically the tenant is supposed to hold back 25% of their rent and pay it directly to Canada Revenue Agency if their landlord is out of the country and not otherwise dealing with this. Okay, so what's his position? Well, he ends up renting this place, and at some point it gets sold to a woman by the name of Sebastiana Trimarchi, and she is in Italy, apparently. So he doesn't really realize this because nobody thinks about this. Nobody realizes that this is a law. Nobody considers this issue. So she signs the lease in Italy. She gives two phone numbers, which are a Montreal number and an international number. And she also puts down an address on the lease agreement, which gives her address as an address in Quebec. So he says he probably didn't pay attention to any of these things as he's going. Now, he makes two arguments. The first argument that he makes is he says, I don't think she's actually out of the country. I think she's actually Canadian, and this would be important because then he wouldn't have any of these responsibilities. So his arguments are she's got family that are in Quebec. That's his mother her mother and her brother. She's also got documents that suggest she had an address in Canada, so there's a few of those. That she has a bank account in Canada, which is where he's paying the rent, and that she had a social insurance number indicating that she was a resident of Canada at some point, and there's no evidence to suggest that she ceased to be a resident. Now, his lawyer in the court process was forced to acknowledge that these ties were, and I'm quoting here, not a lot, and then added, but it is all we have. So that was not terribly successful. The court found that she wasn't living in Canada for a number of reasons, including, one, she didn't file any income tax returns and didn't have any information returns showing income. Two, the absence of any links to property in Canada other than the rental property. Three, an empty Equifax report. Four, the phone number that they reached her at was a number in Italy. Five, she told a Canada Revenue Agency auditor that she was living in Italy. Six, the other addresses that they sort of found for her were addresses of family members in Canada, but didn't seem to be her. Seven, she made an application in federal court and she stated that she was a non-resident in that application. And then finally, she had email correspondence with the guy, and that was from an email address that ended in .it, so Italy. Okay, so his next argument is, I didn't know she wasn't Canadian, so how am I supposed to follow this if I don't know she's not Canadian? And the court's answer to this is basically tough. I'm going to link the case in the description below so you can read the full case. I'm just going to summarize it here, but I am going to quote a little bit here. They say, based on the above analysis, I find that subsection 215 sub 6, which is the relevant section, is devoid of any requirement that the payer have knowledge that the payee is a non-resident. The provision clearly states that where a person has failed to deduct and remit as required, they're liable for Part 8 or Part 13 tax. Having concluded that Sebastiana Trimarchi was a non-resident during the relevant years, and the evidence having shown that the appellant has failed to withhold and remit the 25% tax payable on the rent paid to her, the appellant is liable for Part 13 tax. Further, the appellant is liable for penalties and interest as provided for by subsections 227 and 8.3. So not only is he liable for paying an extra 25%, he also has to pay interest and penalties for not getting this. Now, the court acknowledges that this may have harsh consequences, and they say, however, in light of the purpose of the scheme, I am persuaded that subsection 215 sub 6 is meant to apply in a way that imposes liability on the resident payer, such as the appellant, who has failed to withhold and remit. Now, they did address his argument to say, I didn't know. I didn't know. How could I have known? And they said, well, there is a due diligence defense that's available. They say, I agree with the appellant that a defense of due diligence is available, but, of course, that defense has to be made out, and that's specifically with regards to the penalty. The appellant has not proven that it has exercised reasonable care to ensure compliance with its obligations. The courts have found that to be successful in mounting a defense to the imposition of a penalty, it is expected that the taxpayer seeking to invoke a due diligence defense must show that they exercised a high degree of diligence to comply with their obligations under the Act. In the circumstance of this case, the appellant took no steps to ensure compliance with its withholding obligations. Counsel submitted that the appellant was justified in not taking steps to ensure compliance because it had no reason to believe that Sebastiana Trimarchi was a non-resident. Unfortunately, that is not enough to meet the standard of a high degree of diligence. I therefore find that the minister was justified in assessing the penalty pursuant to the Act. So, not only does he owe those things, but he owes the penalties, and to avoid the penalties, he has to do a high degree of diligence. So you might be saying, wait a minute, I rent. How do I avoid this? Well, the CRA had some tips about this. They had some suggestions for how you might avoid these kinds of issues. And I'm going to tell you, these suggestions are kind of ridiculous. So the first suggestion is to conduct a land title search to check your landlord's contact information for a non-Canadian address, phone number, email address, etc. So most people don't necessarily know how to conduct a land title search, but they're saying basically check the property and see if they put down a non-Canadian address, which might not help at all. Even if you do this, and it takes time to get a land title search. By the time that comes back, the property you were looking at probably already rented, especially in the current rental market, which is insane. So good luck with that one. Now, the next one is actually even worse. They suggest that you check with your landlord and ask them for a certificate of residency from the Canada Revenue Agency. Now, I can tell you, when they have a lineup of people who want to rent from them, if you are sitting there going, I need this certificate of residency, they're going to say, cool, next. I don't see that this is likely that landlords are actually going to pony this up. So the next bit is include a representation and indemnity in your lease agreement regarding their tax obligations. So you're supposed to ask for an indemnity clause in your lease agreement. I don't see any chance that your landlord is going to agree to an indemnity clause at all. But, maybe if you have a unicorn there to help you in some alternate universe, no. And they also warn that if your landlord is trying to change where you pay taxes, then you should be concerned because maybe they've sold to some foreign owner. So that is concerning. That is, how would you possibly Yeah, I mean, maybe you could say, hey, I'm concerned about this. But the other thing is your lease is probably already signed and you're probably stuck with that. This is a real burden, and it's quite frankly a little bit nasty. Because if you get it wrong the other way, if you suspect that your landlord is might be not Canadian, and you start sending 25% of the rent to the CRA instead of to your landlord, you're going to get evicted. So you kind of have to get this right. And it's even more difficult than that because you might actually physically know where your landlord lives. Like you might be able to drive by and see them through the window, eating dinner or whatever. But that may also not be their residency for tax purposes. And it's their residency for tax purposes that is what matters here. And so there's just, but you're required to get it right. So yeah, this is very unfair to renters, and it cost this guy a whole pile of money, and it could cost you a whole pile of money. When we see the current government saying we're going to make things fairer for renters, I mean, this one looks like an easy win. Now, the other fun thing on this one is that often the Canada Revenue Agency has other means to pursue these taxes. They could go after, for instance, the property and say, listen, instead of going after the actual tenant, we're going to claim the taxes owed out of the property itself. The problem is that in this case, once things got started, the landlord sold the property. Now, apparently, this guy alerted the Canada Revenue Agency and said, hey, they're selling the property. Get in there, file a claim, get that money, settle this debt, we're all good. But Canada Revenue Agency didn't act quickly enough, and all of the money was then sent out of the country, probably to Italy. And at that point, Canada Revenue Agency can't touch it. You know who they can get, though, is the guy left behind. So the tenant can easily be left behind, sort of holding the bag, and that's rough. So you might be asking me to make this make sense. I don't think I can, other than to say that the tax laws are written so that the tax man always gets their money, even if it feels really, really unfair. So every time there's sort of discussion about the advantages of renting versus owning, put this one in the solid owning category. The other thing to note here is that foreign ownership and foreign landlords are a big thing in Canada. There's a lot of them. How do you know? Well, best of luck. Anyway, that's this story. Let me know if you have comments or questions. I'll try to address some of those in the comments below. I'm also going to link, as I said, the full case, just so that you can read it and see the details that I skimmed over. If you really, I would have sort of gone through it in the usual fashion, except that it's a tax law case, and tax law is incredibly boring. It just is. So anyway, I want to thank you for making it this far. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content like it. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: CCFR, Canada's National Firearms Association, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, PJs Forever, and Purple Dragonair. And at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Larry Kalniak, Kyle Fox, Drunk All of the Baileys, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, Vicky, and Dorky Dane. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. Hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.